The goal, absolute knowing, consists in spirit knowing itself as spirit. Ah yes, spirit knowing itself as spirit. Sounds profound, final, and apparently everything is leading up to this moment. History, art, religion, reason, even the goddamn French Revolution. But you're probably asking, what the fuck is spirit? Exactly, and that's precisely why Hegel wrote the Phenomenology of Spirit. And Hegel is a tricky bastard, because the only way to understand what spirit is, and why it's more fundamental than logic, science, or even your own sense of self, is to walk the whole path. You don't get to define spirit up front. You can only see it retroactively, in the reflection, in the aftermath. It is oppressive, like the oppressiveness of language in Lacan, where the meaning of the sentence only becomes clear at... Just kidding. At the end of the sentence, no matter how many signifiers come before. So, where do we begin this whole wild ride towards spirit knowing itself? We start where Hegel starts. At the most immediate, the most certain thing we seem to have. Consciousness. For the first time in German idealism, we get a very clear and explicit separation between consciousness and self-consciousness. As we saw in Fichte, self-consciousness is seeing that we are seeing. It's the moment of reflection, the eye that turns back on itself. But that's not where we start. We start way before that, with just plain seeing, or what Hegel calls sense certainty. It's the most immediate relation to the world. It just says this, now, here. No concepts, no mediation, no categories. Just the raw stuff of experience. Take a simple judgment, for example. This is a tree, or now is night. Seems innocent enough. But here's the thing. Consciousness thinks that just by pointing to something, it's grasping truth. Absolute truth. It thinks immediacy equals knowledge, that seeing is knowing. But here comes the problem. And this is where the dialectic kicks in. Try to describe this. Try to capture it in language. You'll find yourself using universals. Words like this or now. But this isn't really particular. Now doesn't actually refer to this very moment. Let's test this. You say, now is night. You write it down, it feels true. But the next morning, you read it again and it's no longer night. So, what happened? Hegel says, the now that is night is preserved. That is, it is treated as what it truly is. As something that has been superseded. Exactly. The now didn't capture the moment, it abstracted it. It turned something concrete and singular into something universal. Language doesn't preserve the real, it replaces it. So every time I try to pinpoint a particular, I turn it into something general. Every attempt to say the singular ends up negating it. And this is exactly what we've already seen in Lacan. This is the real, that which cannot be symbolized, that which slips away the very moment we try to name it. And the real isn't just what's outside language. It's what is destroyed by language. It's the thing that disappears because we speak. It's the very attempt to symbolize the real, to capture it in signifiers, that we create a negation. As Lacan would say, the signifier represents the subject for another signifier, meaning the subject, the particular, is never there in language. It's always deferred, always represented, and never present. So, in Hegel's own terms, we begin with the judgment that we can know the real as immediate. But when we try to express this immediacy, we're forced to use signifiers. We describe the particular using universals. And this is an internal contradiction within consciousness. It collapses under its own claim to immediacy. So, as always in Hegel, the contradiction pushes us forward. The shape of consciousness we started with is no longer tenable. It breaks down. And thus we are sublated, aufgehoben, cancelled and preserved. We move to the next stage, perception. After the collapse of immediacy and sense certainty, consciousness changes strategy. It no longer believes that truth can be found in just pointing at something. It now assumes maybe truth lies in what the object is, not that it is. And so we enter the stage of perception. This is no longer about direct presence. We are now in the realm of representations. Or, to put it in Kantian terms, the manifold of representations. The object isn't grasped as a pure this, but as a thing with properties. Take salt, for example. It's white, it's cubic, it's salty. These are all universals, general properties that appear in many different things. Snow is white, sugar is sweet, crystals are cubic, but perception now assumes all these properties are gathered in this one thing. That the object, the thing, is a kind of unity that holds them together. So far, so good. No, not quite. Because Hegel immediately points out the contradiction. Are these properties just floating around? Or are they grounded in something, the thing in itself? On the one hand, perception treats the object as a unity, one thing with many properties. But on the other hand, each of these properties seems to exist independently. They're universals, and universals, by definition, apply to more than just one case. So, either the thing is something beyond the properties, a bare substratum that we never perceive, or it is something but its properties, a heap, a bundle with no inner coherence. Hegel puts it precisely. The thing is the passive medium in which the many properties subsist independently. But that's the issue. The thing is supposed to unify its properties. But these properties don't seem to need it at all. So perception swings back and forth. Sometimes it focuses on the one, sometimes on the many. Sometimes the thing appears to hold the properties together. Other times it dissolves into a pile of floating attributes. So we get contradiction again. Not from outside, but from within the very structure of this knowing. And this is where Lacan enters the scene again. This stage of consciousness corresponds to what he calls the imaginary, because what perception tries to do is synthesize an image of the object. It tries to make the thing appear coherent, stable, and whole. But that wholeness is a fantasy, a gestalt. It's the same structure as the mirror stage. The subject misrecognizes itself as a unified image, when in fact it's split, fragmented, and lacking. The salt is treated as one object, but it's just a stitching together of attributes. And so the ego is treated as one self, but it's just a stitching together of signifiers. Perception is imaginary. It believes in unity, but only by ignoring contradictions. So once again, consciousness fails its own project. It wanted the object to be real, stable, objective, self-identical, but that object keeps falling apart. What it thought was truth, the unity of the object, turns out to be another illusion. And this collapse, just like before, forces a transition. Consciousness begins to suspect that the truth is not in the appearance at all. That the real object is something beneath them, something hidden, a force. So, perception collapsed. The object, the supposed unity of properties, disintegrated under its own contradictions. But consciousness doesn't give up. It just shifts strategy. It now says, maybe the truth isn't in the appearances at all. Maybe it lies behind them. Maybe reality isn't what shows itself, but what hides itself. Welcome to understanding. And with it, the great metaphysical gesture. Let's explain the visible by positing the invisible. Now, consciousness becomes scientific. It starts to think in terms of forces, laws, and essences. Take a magnet. I see metal moving. I don't stop, however, at what I see. I posit a force, magnetism, operating underneath. Same with gravity. I do not just see things fall, I imagine an invisible law pulling them down. This is the whole Enlightenment worldview. There's a deeper, intelligible reality, and science explains the surface by referencing what lies underneath. But here is Hegel's question. What exactly is this force? Because I never actually encounter it. All I see is its effect, its manifestation. The force only appears when it acts. It only exists in relation, and that's a problem. Because force was supposed to be the in itself, stable, hidden, pure. But I only ever know it through its opposite, through what it does, through change, through interaction. So, understanding tries to clean things up. It splits reality into two worlds. The first is the world of appearance, the stuff we see. The second is the supersensible world, the hidden realm of laws, forces, and truth. But the contradictions don't go away. In fact, they get worse. Because even this in itself is split. Every force implies its opposite. Every stable law generates its own reversal. So to fix the cracks, understanding tries one last move. It invents the inverted world. This is the mirror universe of the original, a strange second world where all the oppositions are reversed. If in the world like repels like, in the inverted world like attracts like. If here we see disorder, there must be a deeper law, flipped and stable. But now we've gone off into the deep end. Let us look at an example. Imagine someone who keeps messing up. They keep acting in a way that contradicts what they believe about themselves. They say, I'm a kind person, but they snap at their partners. They say, I'm confident, but they're anxious in every room they enter. They say, I know what I want, but they keep changing course. Eventually, they start to feel alienated from who they are, and they say, that's not the real me. The real me is deep down. I'm just not myself lately. So they invent this second self, an invisible, pure, true version of themselves that's buried underneath the mess. The self they should be, the one that's stable, coherent and whole. But there's the problem. The real self isn't something they ever actually experience. It's just a reflection to the contradiction they feel now. It's an inverted image, an ideal, created to make sense of the failure in the first self. They haven't resolved anything, they've just pushed the contradiction into a fantasy. That's the inverted world. Not a discovery of essence, but a second-order illusion created to defend a failed structure. You haven't escaped the contradiction, you've just given them a mask. As Hegel writes, thus there arises a dual world, the world of appearance and the world as it is in truth, the world turned upside down. But this upside down world doesn't save understanding. It exposes it. Because now, even the essence is contradictory. Even the thing we posited to fix appearances ends up looking just like appearance, but flipped. At this point, consciousness is forced to admit this split between inner and outer, law and appearance, essence and phenomenon, isn't in the object. It is in me. This is the Lacanian split subject, between the signifier and that which is signified, between thinking and being. It created a split through the symbolic order. In trying to explain the world, consciousness discovers it's been explaining itself all along. So the whole idea of an objective, law-governed world apart from the subject collapses. And with this collapse, the next shape emerges. Consciousness no longer seeks truth in the object or behind the object. It now turns inward. It begins to suspect that the object is not other, but somehow itself. Hegel writes, consciousness of an other, of an object, is in truth consciousness of itself. And just like that, we passed from consciousness to self-consciousness. We went from sense certainty to perception to force and understanding, the first 3 chapters of the Phenomenology. A chronological path from the immediate to the mediated towards the force behind the appearance and the subsequent forced reflection inward. It is not hard to see the striking resemblance with the philosophy of Fichte or the psychoanalogy of Lacan, for example, discussed in previous videos. So now, consciousness has reached the limits of its own powers. It cannot find itself in the world, not in sense, not in perception, and not in force. The world is fragmented, and this very fragmentation will force spirit to look inward. And so we arrive at the turning point and the topic of our next video: self-consciousness. Desire, negation, and the struggle for recognition are next. Thank you for watching this video, my inverted friends. I think this content on Hegel is really nice since it is a summary of all we have seen before. And that is exactly what Hegel himself intended to demonstrate. For now, I hope that something good happens to you today. And of course to see you in the next video.